Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the ScruffyMovies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
Today, we have a very interesting one for you. It's one that I think Crocker and I have, we've just been excited to talk about a long time, and we were kind of racking our brains for recent stuff. Just movies and kind of TV shows in general are moving a little bit slow right now, I feel like, just with announcing everything or just getting like some general excitement around some new releases and stuff like that. So we decided to kind of go old school a little bit, go back to our childhood, grab a movie from there, a franchise that has survived past our childhood and into present day, and that's the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise.
Yeah, it's weird to hear it referred to as a franchise from our childhood, even though that really is sort of the era that it came from, you know. It's strange to think that these movies are old enough now that they can be put into a category like that. Like they have been around for that long.
Yeah, I even as I was sitting down and thinking about stuff I wanted to talk about today, I was actually thinking about how crazy it is that like Pirates of the Caribbean 3 came out in 2008. And that was when I first got like into a group of friends where we like went out on our own, you know, it wasn't like adult supervision. And so that was the summer that Pirates of the Caribbean 3 released. And of course, everyone was obsessed with that. So I saw that movie in theaters probably like 4 or 5 times at least.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those franchises where you see them so much, but even for being that old, like one thing that has always just impressed me, and probably one of the major selling points in the early days of this franchise, is how visually stunning these movies are. Like they all look awesome. Yep. Even the early ones from when did the Black Pearl come out? Was that like
2003, if I'm not mistaken?
So that many years ago, basically forever ago at this point, that movie to me still holds up as far as CG and just looks and feel and everything else to new movies that are coming out today. I mean, even especially like in some of the later ones where you get into like Davy Jones and all of that, and they have the crazy ghost ship and the people that are mainly CG. It all looks so good. And I know Disney has, for generations, always been the one to set that benchmark, but it's rare that you can watch a movie from over a decade ago and be like, oh yeah, this fits right in, I feel like.
Yeah, the only one that directly comes to my mind, and we've talked about this a little bit, was Jurassic Park. That's the only other movie I can think of that's so old, but you can still watch it and be like, okay, yeah, those effects aren't so bad. But yeah, that was one thing. And I remember seeing Pirates of the Caribbean was one of the first movies I had seen on Blu-ray as well, because I didn't get a Blu-ray player until maybe like 2009 or so is when I got my first Blu-ray player. So that's when I really started to like get Blu-rays and stuff. And one of the first ones I found was an old Curse of the Black Pearl Blu-ray that was released like when At World's End came out back in 2007 or 2008. And so like watching that on Blu-ray, I had this little tiny TV, but it was an HD TV. And watching that, I was like, wow, look at the water. I was just like sitting in front of the TV staring at it and was like, look at that water. Oh.
Yeah, it definitely does not hurt that the settings for these movies are like some of the most beautiful places on the planet.
Yeah, that kind of, even if the cinematography was just like, oh, hey, let's go set a camera out over here, it would still be like, wow, this is beautiful. What beautiful camera work, even though it might not have been.
Yeah, exactly. Because that is actually the color of that water and how beautiful those cliff sides are and rock formations and everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, in the setting, let's just talk about that for a minute, because we've already said it in this podcast, but these movies like defined a generation. Like I have friends that I went to high school with that legitimately got P's tattooed on their wrist after these movies came out. Like that's how hardcore people were into pirates at the time. And that happens, right? There's a stint where everyone was into vampires and then everyone was into pirates, you know? So like that happens with culture, but even to this day, the pirate setting in and of itself, like out there on the ocean, sleazy seaports, and then rich, fancy state-sponsored armadas like the Spaniards and the British and all of that are in the picture too. And you get everything from Europe to the Caribbean. Like that whole just setting in general, to me, is one of my favorite. And I'm genuinely curious why we don't actually see more pirate movies now. Like you would think with this being such a defining genre for a while, that there would have been all kinds of spin-off pirate movies and spin-off pirate franchises. And other than maybe a couple that came out, it definitely wasn't like, oh, we're into zombies now, so everything's going to be zombies, or we're into, vampires, so literally every TV show is going to be vampires for a decade. Like for this to be such an awesome setting, it never really took off as a multimedia wide sort of push. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, hey, Captain Phillips came out.
Captain Phillips. Yes, it did. Way after the fact.
The Tom Hanks drama movie about Somali pirates.
About actual Somali pirates. Yeah, that was way too serious of a movie to be in this.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that up. I've never kind of thought about that before. It almost makes me wonder if other franchises were so scared, because I mean, these pirate movies were like gigantic, huge, like franchise hits, so that like if they thought, oh, we'll make our own pirate franchise, that people wouldn't not be able to compare it to Pirates of the Caribbean. And if it was like even one little bit less than Pirates of the Caribbean, people wouldn't have liked it.
I mean, and again, the Pirates of the Caribbean were so good. Like they looked so good, and they went after some hardcore stuff. Like they didn't just sit back and think of, oh, what is the cheapest to film and what would get the job done. Like they went all in on CGI. They went all in on awesome actors and actresses. Like if anyone were to rival it, they would have to hit it out of the park. I mean, now that I've had a moment to think about it, the only other movie I could think of that was even kind of in that setting was like Master and Commander. And that did come out about the same time.
Yeah, and that one wasn't like a fun swashbuckling adventure though.
Right. Exactly. But why are there no swashbuckling adventures? I mean, back in the day, you had everything from like Robinson Crusoe to Gilligan's Island to Flipper. Like, they had more like island-esque settings where everything was like palm trees and where did the rum go kind of deal. But you really don't get that. And it blows my mind that the world has just sort of set back and said, all right, Disney, you kick so much ass with Pirates of the Caribbean. Nobody's going to even try and rival it. We're just going to let you do it, and you can get as crazy as you want to get, because some of these movies do get crazy. We're just going to let it happen and accept it as the bar.
Yeah, I mean, kind of thinking about big franchises just in general, though, and I'm going to bring up two other Disney franchises now, but Star Wars, nothing really rivals Star Wars except maybe Star Trek, if you can argue Star Trek. But even then, I think that's only begins to rival it because it was around like as a TV show and everything before Star Wars even came out. And then, modern day example, we see the Marvel Cinematic Universe coming out. And of course, our society is like plagued with superhero stories now, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the only ones that are doing it good, to the point that people are like, why are you even trying, DC? Like, just stop trying. Quit trying to do this.
Yeah, and I think with the Star Wars, Star Trek thing, that was a result of both of those being targeted to the same audience. So as many people as there are in the world that are Trekkies or Star Wars geeks or whatever you want to call them, the cross section of people that like both is way bigger than the polls where the people only like one or the other. And I think that just in and of itself keeps that conversation alive, Star Trek versus Star Wars. Mm-hmm. As far as like space operas, The only two others that come to mind are Firefly and Serenity, which are a pair as a show and a movie.
Yeah.
And then Guardians of the Galaxy is technically a space opera as well. And they do, I mean, both of those are great. Firefly, it was such an awesome show. It got one series, literally like one season, and then was canned for some reason I'm not aware of. And people were so upset they brought it back to do a movie to somewhat close out the story called Serenity. And those are great. If you guys out there have not checked those out yet, probably one of my favorite TV shows of all time. And I have a pretty serious rule against watching TV shows with only one season, but in this case, you couldn't help it. And then, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy is very similar in the fact that you have a lot of characters that tell a large story across a giant universe. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you can compare it to Marvel and DC and all of that. But when I think of like Star Wars and what it was, I see that as sort of a standalone, like more like comparing that to Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, if the greater Star Wars universe, including all of the TV shows and everything else and the standalone solo movies and whatnot, maybe we get like a Obi-Wan movie or something. Maybe it'll eventually get to the point where there's enough storytelling and sort of world backing to rival an entire cinematic universe like Marvel, but I don't know if they're there yet. And I don't know if that's a lie. I definitely want them to be there. I definitely want Star Wars to be there.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, because with every new Star Wars movie comes a wave of new fears that
yes.
Yeah, that it's like, oh God, is this going to be another Last Jedi? Are we going to squeak by with another like Force Awakens? Is it going to be a good like Rogue One or something? Is it going to be like a sleeper hit like Solo? Like there's just a wave of new fears for me as like a diehard Star Wars fan whenever a new Star Wars movie is coming out. So it is a double-edged sword. I'm always excited, but then the other side of that, I'm like, oh God, I don't know about this one.
But, to bring this back to the Pirates of the Caribbean too, it is the fact that you are telling such a large story that has so many characters involved. Like this isn't one of those films where you have, your antagonist, protagonist, your love interest, and your comic relief character, and then that's the movie. Like there are literal entire ship crews
right.
that we're dealing with here. And and it gets crazy. In the Black Pearl, in the first movie, it was more straightforward as you would expect. And then in Dead Man's Chest, they're like, oh, here's Davy Jones and all his crew. And then you get Bootstrap and all those boys. And then by the time you move into World's End, it's like actual entire leagues of pirates and, Calypso, and things just get real crazy real quick,
Yeah.
But they do a great job, though. To me, World's End should have probably been 2 movies because they tell 2 movies worth of story in that one movie. But other than that, it's phenomenal what they've been able to do, because even with like Star Wars and stuff now, you've heard me say we've almost got too many characters. Like I feel like they're either not showing all of the characters the love that they need, or they're choosing the wrong characters to show that love to. And you never get that feeling when you're watching the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise.
Well, that was actually something I was going to bring up, but kind of more in like I always thought that 2 and 3 and I know you're a fan of lore and mythology. So just myself watching the movies, I always thought 2 and 3 got too deep into the story almost. And like you said, if they would have split it out into a couple movies, cool, got it. But those were movies that were like 3 hours long, where if you took a bathroom break, you missed something. Like every single minute was important. You couldn't skip anything. So I almost felt like they were getting too deep into stuff. Whereas in Curse of the Black Pearl, I liked it because it was just like, oh, Jack Sparrow used to have this ship. Now he doesn't. Now it's run by ghost pirates. They're coming after each other. Jack Sparrow's run into all these people. Now like all these stories are tied up together.
Yeah, and so Golden Blood and then that movie's over.
Right. It was more simplistic. And then they tried to do that again with 4 on Stranger Tides. And they thought, well, if we cut out everything from the first couple movies and only leave Jack Sparrow, then we've done it, which they didn't. I enjoy 4, but it's missing something, which I think is all these other characters you've come to know and love. And so that's why I actually really like the most recent one, 5, Dead Men Tell No Tales. That one is really good because it has Jack in it, but also Barbossa, and then it has hints of Will Turner comes back, and Keira Knightley comes back, and all these characters come back. They're not necessarily like main characters overall to the plot. Like they're not there 24/7, but they're there. Like they're there enough where you get the hints of them, and it reminds you of the old pirate stuff while being its own new thing. And I think that's what 4 tried to do, but they went too heavy with the scissors, and they only left Johnny Depp. And they're like, good, got it.
Yeah, I have a confession to make. I have not seen the most recent one.
Dead Men Tell No Tales?
Dead Men Tell No Tales.
It's my favorite. It is my favorite.
Is it?
Since the first one.
It came out less than 2 years ago.
2017, I believe.
Yeah, because that has been on top of my list of things to catch up on. But as with most movies that are like 3 hours long, you just kind of have to pick and choose when you want to knock it out.
Yeah, that one is my favorite since the first one. I felt like it has been the only one that the first time I watched the first one and felt that kind of like Pirates magic, like that Disney magic. That's the only one where in the theater I was like, whoa, they did it again. Like that's the only one.
That's a good explanation of like how I felt with Stranger Tides. Is it did lose a little bit of the Disney magic. Like when I got done watching Stranger Tides, I was like, okay, acceptable entry into the franchise, into the story. Like I can't hate on it, but at the same time, it definitely did not have the sizzle that the other movies had. Now that is, of course, we were coming off of World's End at that point, so you were going in expecting to just be pounded with information and plot and twists and double crosses and everything else. And then there was a decent bit of that in Stranger Tides, but it was more of like they sort of skimmed the surface. But I did like it. I mean, I didn't leave feeling like I was disappointed in Stranger Tides. Plus, mermaid tears. Come on, bro.
Do what?
The plus mermaid tears. Come on.
No, I enjoy on Stranger Tides, but I agree with you. And one thing that it is like glaringly obvious how deep into continuity and then like writing themselves out of holes go is just look at Captain Barbossa's storyline.
Oh, he's died like twice at least.
Yeah, he was a ghost pirate, then he wasn't, he got shot, but then he wasn't really dead. But then it was like, oh, maybe Calypso brought him back. But then he was a good guy and was like working with them. Then he was like a general in the British Army in 4.
Wearing a wig and all.
Yeah. And then in 5, he's like, he comes back. I can't even remember what he's doing in 5, but he's not even like a general in the army anymore. He's something totally different again.
One of my favorite moments, and it's funny you bring this up, like I don't have many criticisms of, in fact, maybe that is a topic we need to roll into after this. Like what are some things we don't like? Because these movies are so awesome. But one of the things that I will never forget ever is at the end of Dead Man's Chest. I'm fairly certain, yes, at the end of Dead Man's Chest.
Yeah, it's Dead Man's Chest.
Was eaten, yeah, or Jack was dead. And then they're talking to Calypso, who we don't know is Calypso at that time.
Right.
And she says, oh, well, there's a way to get him back. You have to go to World's End, next movie title, and there's only one captain that can get you there. And Barbossa has just been hanging out upstairs. They're down here mourning Jack's death. Like all the freaking crew is there. They're having a sad time. And Barbossa's just chilling upstairs, just waiting to make his dramatic entry. when the conversation managed to get itself to where Calypso was like, oh, but you can't get him back. There's only one captain. And I've got him staged and ready to make a dramatic entrance. That
I've positioned him upstairs.
Yes.
He knows the code word is Barbossa.
Yes. His 6 is on name, exactly. Well, when it comes to criticisms of this franchise, though, little things like that I let him get away with, because we are talking about ghost pirates and we are talking about a voodoo priestess, and you give them a little bit of leniency. But if there's one time I ever thought they got a little too far out there, was like when they went to whatever the upside down is in their world, and you have the Jack Sparrow acid trip where there's like 50 Jack Sparrows and they're riding on crab rocks, and it's like a massive acid trip that really kind of doesn't make any sense in the movie, and you could have totally replaced it with literally anything else that you needed to go rescue Jack from. They like wash up on the shore and they basically just wash up to Jack's feet, like they didn't even have to go looking for him. The acid trip was just a little too much for me. Like, I remember sitting in the theaters thinking, oh no, is this where the franchise starts to go south, because they're reaching a little too far? Now, I'm totally fine with voodoo and ships and bottles and mermaid tears and everything else, but you bring the acid trip in there and you're getting past me just a little bit.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of that stuff ties into, and we've said it a couple times already, but just the Disney magic of it all. And so Disney is a really good company too. They can create a bunch of different stories, but they still have the same, like, it's still this, like, you can watch a movie and be like, was that a Disney movie? Like, it's something about it. And it's not the actors or the story or the direction or anything like that. It's just, there's something about it. There's like a tone to Disney movies. And so when you start kind of taking away from that tone in your mind, it's the same as if you ordered like a Coke at a restaurant and they bring you a Dr. Pepper. It's not that you dislike Dr. Pepper, but you were expecting a Coke. And so it's kind of jarring when you take the first sip and you're like, oh, that's not Coke. And I feel like that's the same with a lot of Disney movies, where if they kind of go outside their own gate and themes too much, it starts to lose the audience a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of the feel of this movie, I think, or these movies came from the score. And I mean, when you talk about Marvel and Star Wars and Jurassic Park and all these other big movies we've talked about so far today, one of the most emotionally like hitting factors of these movies is the score. And you're watching a Pirates of the Caribbean movie as soon as the first bit of music comes on, be it I can't even think of it now, but like the really eerie sort of creepy song, all the way to the big major theme, where everything kind of starts off. It's like, when that music starts playing, it does something. It is part of that Disney magic. And I don't know how high the percentage is on the Disney magic with what the score and the music can do, but I think it's pretty high.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think a good film score can elevate a movie from good to like a cult classic, because just even as you were going through, you were just like naming them off. In my head, the riffs started to play. And I'm not a big guy that's like super into music or anything, but like when there's something that I'm expecting to hear, like I remember they kind of held off on the theme in On Stranger Tides at first. And it was Jack Sparrow was being interrogated by these police officers who had kidnapped him. And then stuff starts to go a little haywire. Jack starts to make his escape. And as he starts to make his escape is when the theme kicks in for the first time. And I remember seeing that in the theater and being like, yes, now it started. Like it was the entry back into the universe for me. And Jurassic World makes a great use of it, where the kids are exploring the park in Jurassic World and they actually find the old Jurassic Park headquarters just in the jungle now of Jurassic World. And as they walk in, you hear the classic Jurassic Park theme, but it's really slowed down and like sad and desolate. And it's like this theme used to be lively and invigorating when this park was alive. And it just goes to show like all of this is kind of darker and more desolate and empty and hollow now. And so all of these themes play back into like what you feel from the movie. And anytime that like the giant Pirates of the Caribbean theme, the main theme starts playing, you're like, oh, here we go. Like this is about to be something really cool.
And I can't believe that all of this really spawned from one of the more popular Disney rides, like an
Yes.
actual Disney ride. This was not a largely successful movie that Disney decided they needed to make a corner of their theme park out of because the movie did so well. This was a long time standing, very well known Disney ride that I have ridden who knows how many times just growing up and all my trips to Disney World. And I remember it, you know, and then all of a sudden massive blockbuster movies are coming out of the ride. Like, how often does that happen? Has that ever happened? Like, has there ever been sort of the reverse of what is normal in today's world, where the movie comes first and then the ride?
Not the only company that I know of that's done it that way is Disney. And I'd actually written down some of them that when the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise hit it big, Disney started like putting a bunch of their rides into movies. But first, I want to mention that, kind of talking about this, I had never been to Disney until I was 17. So, I mean, once I was old enough, I knew that Pirates of the Caribbean was based on a ride at Disney. But I remember seeing stuff, and gosh, I can't remember it now, but it's some movie where the guys, they're locked up in like a prison. And I knew the movie came out in like the 90s, and they're trying to get this dog to go fetch them the keys. And when the guy's telling them the plan, he's like, we're going to get this dog to go fetch us the keys, like in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
And I remember that scene in the movie. Little did I know that's also a staged animatronic in the ride that had already been set up. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Are these guys freaking time travelers? How did they know about the Pirates of the Caribbean movie in the 90s? And how did they know that was going to be a scene in it? And so I went in there and looked it up. And then that's when I realized it was a ride and that the movies were just based on the ride. I had no idea.
Oh yeah, totally. And I remember the ride. Like, I can distinctly remember like what the boats look like that you ride in, or at least what they looked like over a decade ago, probably before the first movie came out. I remember Tortuga. Like, I remember some of the characters. I don't remember seeing the dog and the keys, but it was really not like a spectacular ride. Like, it wasn't a roller coaster. It was one of those like product to the 1950s style Disney rides, where it was more like you get in the little boat and you go through the man-made, you know, river that is sort of in a giant warehouse that looks like it has all the piratey stuff around it. And it's more of the classic, like 1940s, 1950s, like Disney storytelling. Like, you get on this ride, like the Peter Rabbit ride, you know, with Splash Mountain, where it tells a giant long story and then there's kind of a big drop at the end, and that gives you your thrill and then you're done. So it was never like a hugely popular ride. Like, I don't ever remember waiting in line for hours to ride that like I would a roller coaster, because it's kind of like it's a small world. Like, you just get in the boat, you float around, you see the story that you've seen 1,000 times. It's cool. Animatronic robots were the bomb diggity back in the 70s and 80s, and they've kept them well lubed and working today, you know, and that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, whenever we went to Disney, I do distinctly remember that Pirates of the Caribbean was the only one. It was one of the, if not the only one, that we didn't have to wait for. We basically just walked up and got in a boat. Like, we didn't have to wait to get on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. But a couple of other Disney movies that they made based off of their rides after Pirates of the Caribbean hit it big: The Country Bears, The Haunted Mansion. Apparently, Mission to Mars is based off of a Disney ride at Epcot, which I had no idea that movie was even associated with Disney, like, at all. And then Tomorrowland, which is a more recent one to just come out, is based off of the Tomorrowland section of Disney World. And then there's actually a new one coming out that they were shooting or have just recently finished shooting, called Jungle Cruise, that's based off of the Jungle Cruise ride, and it's starring The Rock and Emily Blunt.
Oh, that's really cool then. So they're actually doing a lot more than I thought. I remember the Mission to Mars ride as well in Disney. I think it was one of like the first times that they used the entire like 4D setting, where they put you in like a capsule that you would normally think of as like what you see in the middle of a mall, where they like play the video of a roller coaster and the capsule tilts around like you're actually going up and down. it was kind of one of those things, but they also like blew mist in your face and wind in your hair and like that kind of thing. And you had the 3D screen and all of that. At least I recall a space ride at Epcot that was like that. Oh, what's that sound mean?
That sound means it's halftime. So as you may know, halftime is just a little space where we take a break from the conversation. We talk about the more recent movies or TV shows or trailers or kind of anything that we've seen recently that we want to take some time to mention. And just last week, we actually started doing our digital code giveaway. And that one was for Thor Ragnarok. And so this week, kind of keeping in tone with our podcast, we're going to be giving away a Disney magic movie, and it's going to be Incredibles 2. So if you want to win the free digital code for Incredibles 2, all you have to do is comment below on YouTube, Supersuit, comment the code word Supersuit, or you can direct message me on Instagram, Supersuit, and you are in the drawing for your free digital copy of Incredibles 2.
Awesome. So kick us off. What have you been looking forward to?
Okay, so actually just yesterday I saw a double feature of movies that I've been looking forward to. And first, and I know I haven't even told you my thoughts on this, so you're probably going to be very interested, was Glass.
Ooh.
And this was a movie that I was very excited to see. I love Unbreakable and I loved Split. And so to be getting kind of the crossover between Unbreakable and Split, and we finally get to see Bruce Willis fight James McAvoy, I was very excited to see that. And it actually didn't disappoint. I've seen the critics saying that Glass was not a very good movie, but I feel like it was almost kind of in line with Venom that came out recently, where the critics were kind of wrong. I think this movie was made for the fans. I don't think it was made for critics. This movie took no time to reintroduce you to characters that you should have known from Unbreakable and Split. And I think that probably had a lot of critics upset, because they may have not seen Unbreakable or Split or one or the other, or they might not have seen them in a long time. And so this movie, like it's just like characters show up and you're like, oh, cool, the person from Split. Or you're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. They brought the guy back from Unbreakable. And if you haven't seen those movies, you're lost. And so I think that might be why it got a little bit of a bad review. Act 2 is a little sluggish. It's interesting, but it is a little slow. There's just not a lot of action happening, but definitely the last half makes up for that. But Glass is very good. I would really recommend going to see Glass if you guys are a fan of Unbreakable or Split. The next movie we saw was a British movie that just came to the States called The Kid Who Would Be King. And this is a modern retelling basically of Arthurian legend, and it's a young child who just happens to find Excalibur after he's being bullied at school. He walks off and he finds Excalibur. And from finding Excalibur, we see Arthur's half-sister Morgana, who's been banished to the underworld, starts to rise back up. So she starts sending demons up and all this kind of stuff. This kid and a newly reformed Merlin have to team up with a bunch of kids from their school and stuff like that to try and defeat Morgana. And it has a lot of callbacks and references and stuff to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table stories. So if you know anything about those, you'll definitely get a kick out of this movie. It was really good, really interesting, really good structure and storytelling. And then for the last one, of course, Jay and Silent Bob reboot just got greenlit. And View Askew movies by Kevin Smith, so kind of all in the Clerks or Jay and Silent Bob universe, however you want to call it, I have loved since I was a kid, and we haven't gotten one since 2006, since Clerks 2. There have been many in the works since then, but we haven't gotten one since Clerks 2. And so the fact that we're getting another one and it's focusing on my two main characters of that franchise, my two favorite characters of that franchise, Jay and Silent Bob, is amazing. And I think from what I've heard about it, this movie is going to be about Hollywood trying to reboot Blunt Man and Chronic, and then Jay and Silent Bob once again have to go and stop it.
Blunt Man and Chronic. God, dude, I'm so glad more of those movies are getting made.
Me too.
So to loop back around a little bit here and make a few comments on yours. For Glass, I had the sneaking suspicion that most of the critics reviews and the reason it wasn't doing so hot is because they had probably not seen the movie that came out 20 years before or whatever that is. Like, I just had a thought that if you weren't caught up and you did not go see this movie because you wanted to see the ending of the trilogy or whatever it may be, then I mean, that's who it was made for. And if you did not go see it because of that, then you probably were going to be lost. And that's probably the situation most critics were in. And I know as professional movie critics, you would think that it would not be that way, but I have a feeling that's kind of the reason it got the scores that it got.
I agree.
As far as the kid who would be king, is that like a coming of age like Arthur tale? Is it like very like modern-ish, or is it sort of more pompous than that, I guess, and more like Knights of the Round Table-y?
No, it's set in present day, and it's just this 12-year-old kid who learns that he's descended from King Arthur, and he's able to pull Excalibur from the stone, and then all this crazy stuff starts happening. Merlin comes back and tells him what's going on, so he ends up taking like his best friend, who's just this kind of like meek little kid that he hangs out with. He knights him so that he can help him fight. He takes the two bullies, the two like main bullies from his school, because they're the strongest people he knows, and he tricks them into being knighted so that they can help in the quest as well. So it's really cool. It's more of a coming of age story, but it's really, really, really good. I liked it a lot.
You know what we need? We need a Pirates of the Caribbean style, like that big and that well done version of like Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, Merlin. Like we've gotten a lot of retellings of that story, probably more retellings of that sort of story in time really than any other story in time. I mean, that is like huge and has been done 1,000 million trillion times in the past, but I can't think of any that were really well done, like period piece, almost like Game of Thrones style, but Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and all that. You know what I mean? I think we need that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% in. I love King Arthur and Arthurian legend and stuff like that. So anytime you can give me more stories like that, I'm in. I'm good. Let's do it.
I can't even think of like the last good one. I mean, the only thing that keeps coming to my mind right now is The Sword and the Stone.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's from 1960 something. So we need a bit of an update.
A kid in King Arthur's court.
Yeah, of course. All right, my halftime. I don't have a lot this week. I think the second Shazam trailer came out, or the extended trailer, and that just got me even more hyped. So definitely interested in seeing that as soon as it drops. And then probably the newest sort of trailer and movie that's coming out that I'm excited for is called Trading Paint. Have you heard of this one yet?
I don't think so, no.
It is all about dirt track racing and some father-son controversy. What's the word I'm looking for there? Father-son disagreement type of movie, you know, like a lot of racing movies are. It's all about dirt track racing, circle track racing, and it's John Travolta and Shania Twain. And I am super pumped because I'm a huge Shania Twain fan, and I will follow her and watch her in anything. And this is also a movie about racing cars, which is probably my favorite other thing in the world other than movies in general. So super, super excited about Trading Paint.
Is that movie coming straight to DVD? Because it sounds like it's coming straight to DVD.
It totally does, doesn't it? I don't know, dude. It may honestly be like a Netflix movie. I'm not even sure. But I have a feeling it's going to be a big release.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, I didn't get the little when I was peeping the trailer, it didn't make a point to do the whole Netflix original thing or Hulu only or whatever like they normally do. So, all right. So that wraps up my halftime then.
That was a quick halftime. Okay, so everyone, just one more time. The code word for this week is super suit. Be sure and comment that below on YouTube. You can also DM me at ScruffyMovies on Instagram, and you'll be entered to win a free digital copy of Incredibles 2. Once again, super suit. comment below or send it to me in a direct message on Instagram, and we will get you entered to win Incredibles 2.
So I don't think we actually covered anything from you as far as things you did not like about the Pirates franchise. Do you have any critiques, anything that sort of hit you sideways, like the upside down or whatever it did for me?
Nothing really other than kind of what I've already talked about, which is just I think they got kind of too deep into their own mythology in 2 and 3. And then I think 4 tried to course correct, but it was a little bit of an overcorrection. I think 5, they finally got it back on track, which is sad because now apparently there is going to be a reboot of the entire franchise. They're just going to do a new Pirates of the Caribbean movie in general, and I don't think Johnny Depp's going to be in it. I don't know if it's going to even have anything to do with any of the characters we've met before, which is kind of sad. I guess that's something I'm upset about, is I really thought 5 did a good job of course correcting the franchise and making it what it used to be. And then now they're just like, oh yeah, well, we're starting over. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe more people feel the way you do, because I know I haven't seen 5 yet, but I don't know if I felt like we needed course correction. Like I felt like they made some decisions in Stranger Tides that I may not have made, and that they made World's End one movie when it should have been 2. But other than that, like, I never got to the point with Pirates where I was like, okay, we need to make a big change, or this is not going to be good. Like, I was pretty much okay with the way things were going. But because the movies did sort of fall off for so long, I'm assuming more people in the world feel the way you do, especially because we're looking at a new entry with little to no reference to the previous entries.
Yeah, and I mean, and I don't dislike any of the Pirates movies. I like all of them, but I do think that was just something that was always caught in my head watching them, was like, if you go to the bathroom, if you take 5 minutes away from this movie's time, then you're lost for the next hour and a half of movie.
Oh yeah, that's a good thing though. That's a good thing. That's what you look for in movies.
Well, but I mean, yes and no. I don't want them to be so like informational packed where if I have an emergency in the movie theater, they're just like, oh yeah, you might as well just go ahead and get your money back because you won't enjoy the rest of this if you leave to use the restroom for a minute and a half. Like normally if I leave, my wife will still be in there or a friend, and I'll run back in and be like, what did I miss? And they can give me like the 2 points real quick. Like, this is what you missed. This guy knows about this guy's sister, and then this guy pulled a gun on this guy, but he didn't shoot. And I'm like, all right, cool, got it, up to speed. Whereas Pirates of the Caribbean, you leave for 5 minutes, you come back in, and it's like, okay, well, turns out Will Turner has been working with Elizabeth this whole time, even though we thought they were broken up. They weren't. Johnny Depp, he's off on his own thing. He's doing this crazy thing as Jack Sparrow. Barbossa's doing this. They're doing this. There's 3 twists that have happened. Two sword fights, and also you missed they played the theme again, and I know how much you like that. You missed that. They played the theme. They sailed across the sea. They went to the upside down. They came back from the upside down. Everything's cool now.
That's a little bit longer than 2 minutes, and they were not short of at least.
Well, that's what I'm saying, man. That's everything. They just jam pack it so much, and so it's not necessarily that it needed course correction, but I was like, I want to go back to the simplicity of 1. I want it to still be a good Pirates movie with all these arcs and stuff that I like, but I don't want you to get so deep into the storyline that it just starts losing the audience. And so 5, I thought, did a great job of doing that, and now we might not even get a 6 from this franchise. It'll just, or a 6 that we want, it'll end up being a new version of this franchise that we haven't seen yet.
God, that's so depressing if they don't reference the movies that came before it. Like, I might be okay, just depending on how it goes, I might be okay with them scrapping most of the main characters as main characters, which we've sort of seen already. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I would be okay with them acting like they did not exist and they were not part of that universe. Like, if they want to sort of soft reboot and say that nothing that, you know, that this is not happening in the same world as everything else, so they have the ability to totally reset everything, that would upset me more than if they were to come out and just say, okay, this happened, the story we're looking at now happened on the other side of the Caribbean where they're not familiar with the goings on of the other side or something like that, and they can sort of do some movie magic stuff and say a line or two to ease my comfort. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's probably the direction that we're gonna go, because as we've seen, movies love soft reboots / sequels now, and I mean that the entire way that people view reboots and sequels now can be tied up with the Men in Black International trailer, because not only in that trailer did they have to tell you other Men in Black agencies exist, they had to 100% guarantee you that this is a sequel by showing Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones in a painting and being like, yeah, these are Men in Black that have come before us. We're still in the universe together, but we're not going to direct. They're probably not going to show up. But they had to let you know in the first 30 seconds of the trailer, this is a sequel. It's in the same universe, because whether or not people care about, that's why I always use the word reboot now instead of remake, because nothing ever, I mean, we still see a couple remakes, but everything's really like reboots now. I mean, the newest Halloween movie that just came out was a reboot. It started its own franchise, but it still kept ties to the original. There's a new Leprechaun movie coming out that does the same thing. Jumanji that just came out does the same thing. All of this stuff comes out as a sequel in the universe to the story we've seen before, but it starts its own story in the universe, but it needs to make sure you know that even though this is a completely new story, the first story is not negated. Whatever you loved is not negated. So I think that's probably the direction we're going to see Pirates 6 take. It might be an entirely new version of people. It might be Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson for all we know. It might be Kevin Hart and The Rock for all we know. Who knows? But I think that they will at least make reference to, oh, yeah, Jack Sparrow or something like that.
Yeah. Gosh, I hope so. I mean, if it weren't for the fact that Disney, because this is still like a major Disney property, correct?
Yes.
So if it weren't for the fact that Disney has done what they have done with Star Wars in recent years, then I would have no fear at all. But it's the fact that they have squandered another one of the largest franchises of all times. So that plants a little bit of fear in me. But then on the flip side of that coin, you've got the Disney folks working on Marvel, and they can do nothing wrong. So, it's all just, it is what it is. And we will accept whatever they come out with like we do for everything else.
Oh, I'm sure whatever this new one is going to kickstart the universe, and we'll see spinoffs, TV shows, whatever from this universe. Because I mean, if we're talking about it right now, then Disney definitely thinks it of, oh yeah, like people could totally be on the other side of the Caribbean. Like we've set up this huge pirate universe, but we've only really explored these like 4 characters and their interactions with a lot of other characters, but we haven't really seen those characters yet. So I think if 6 comes out and it's successful, it's going to be a lot of spinoffs, TV series potentially, who knows.
Well, talking about that universe and spinoffs and everything else coming out, what would you like to see? Let's roll this right over into a quick pitch. We're getting towards the end of the episode here. So I want to know what you want to see out of your Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Okay, so I don't want to spoil Pirates of the Caribbean 5 for you since you haven't seen it, but basically it ends.
Oh, don't worry about me.
Okay, so at the end of the movie, we find out that Will Turner's son, who's been searching for him this whole movie, so he's Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann's son, which sets up their continuation in this franchise. So that character represents the both of them. And he's been with this girl the whole time. We don't know who she is. Turns out she's Captain Barbossa's long-lost daughter, I believe. So that sets up Barbossa to continue in the franchise. And then, of course, I mean, you still have Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow. I think Johnny Depp's going to be willing to be Jack Sparrow for the rest of his life. I mean, if you look at the trajectory of his career after Jack Sparrow, basically the only thing he does now is put on makeup and does a funny voice.
Right.
So, I mean, like that, Pirates of the Caribbean changed his entire career. But basically what I want to see from mine, and it's kind of what I've been saying this whole time, I enjoyed 5 so much. I want to see those characters continue. I want to see specifically Will Turner's son, who has the connection to the past that we know. We don't need to see Will Turner. We don't need to see Elizabeth Swann, but we need to see him. He has the connection that we need, and we can see his continuing adventures with Captain Barbossa's daughter, which keeps both of their continuities in the franchise without necessarily having to have the characters back that have been there since the beginning. And then, of course, I mean, if you want to have Jack Sparrow pop up for a quick scene at the end, I think that would be fine. I don't want Johnny Depp to be in the movie, though. I love him as Jack Sparrow, but I think Jack Sparrow's kind of become a little played out at this point. I think they've kind of gone as far as they can go with Jack Sparrow. And so I want to see these two characters that we know of. Maybe even they have some old people from Jack's crew come in and they start helping them out. I mean, who knows? But I want to see those two take on their own crew and have to go against some sort of supernatural pirate entity. Because I always feel like Pirates of the Caribbean was the strongest when they are directly facing a supernatural entity that they don't know how to defeat. And it's this big, long race to somewhere, some treasure, some land, some final fight, to beat the supernatural entity, to be able to win the fight against them. So that's what my 6th movie would be. I want to see those two characters come back. I want to see them fight something otherworldly, and I want it to be set in a beautiful cinematography of water.
Nice.
How about you? What's yours?
Okay, so mine is 2 totally different ends of the spectrum. And I want to preface this by saying I did not consider either one of these with characters in mind very much. Like if we got sons and daughters of previous characters and they keep on the lineage, that's great. I would be happy with that. Like you said, it would satisfy my need for connection to the previous films. But at the same time, I went into this thinking if we do a complete and total reset, would that really change anything? And I don't think the answer, I think the answer is no, as far as what my 2 ideas are here. First and foremost is more like what I would call like a Robinson Crusoe style, where it's a lot more down to earth. You're probably looking at like an island setting where a majority of the movie takes place, with maybe, of course, some ships and things of that nature as well, but definitely more of the like struggling pirate tale. Like we, have to rob to stay alive. We bury the rum, like way more small focused, smaller number of characters, more like pirates actually trying to survive and not necessarily being like huge flamboyant swashbucklers that manage to go from the Caribbean to Europe to the Caribbean, within a matter of seconds, and everything's all, awesome and nobody gets scurvy and that type of thing. I want it to be like a more struggling tale, I guess, of some pirates. So that's sort of one end of the spectrum, and be way more like down to earth, sort of street level pirate movie. On the total opposite end of the spectrum, I want to double down on basically everything that you didn't like about the pirate movies. I want there to be more depth, more awesome like MacGuffins. I want more awesome props. I love the ships in a bottle. I want more golden chalices and more mermaid tears, like krakens, all kinds of the stuff they've done before. They've hit on so many like pirate tropes that have just not all been in movies until I feel like these came out, that I just want them to continue with that. And I want the big focus of it to be the pirate, like the pirate union. What did they call that? They actually had a name for the pirate union in the movie. The Brethren Court, I believe, is what it was called. And I want to see way more of that with Mick Jagger or Keith Richards or whoever it was that was Johnny Depp's father, like quadrupled down on that. I would like to see a Captain America Civil War style movie with all of the different pirate crews from all over the world, and they're all fighting against one another. Or perhaps we see like a huge state armada like the Spaniards or the British or the French or something like that pose such a threat that you end up with them needing to call in help from all the other pirates from around the world. And then you get the most massive sea battle that has ever been seen on the big screen type of thing. I want it to be huge, bigger than what was in World's End and anything you saw in that. I want them to go deeper on the one piece of the 8, which is sort of the who got to be on the court, right? And that's the reason why most of them wanted to go back and get Jack, is not because they missed Jack, but because he did not pass on his one piece of 8 when he got eaten or whatever. And like that meant enough to the pirates, who have a strangely large amount of rules and a gigantic code to be pirates. Like, go deeper on that, like dive super deep, Lord of the Rings deep on all of that is what I want.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I was just thinking as you were pitching yours, I wouldn't mind seeing a like the Warriors style Pirates of the Caribbean movie where pirates from all around the world are having to meet up, and then this one group of pirates is framed for the death of like one of the people of the court or something, and they become like excommunicated from pirate court, and so all of them now have to like fight their way back to their homeland across the 7 seas against all these pirates that are coming after them. I think that would be really cool too.
Like an actual warrior style fight your way home.
Yeah, like the Warriors, but it's pirates.
I love it. I love it.
Duh.
Awesome.
All right, everybody. Well, that about wraps up this episode of the Scruffy Movies podcast. We hope you've enjoyed. Once again, if you want to win a free digital copy of Incredibles 2, all you got to do is comment the code word SUPERSUIT below on YouTube, or you can direct message me on Instagram at ScruffyMovies. We'll get you entered. We'll do a big drawing, and we'll give one person a free digital copy of Incredibles 2. We thank you all for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at ScruffyMovies and
Crockalicious.
And everybody, last week, Crocker's mic cut out, so it was a long 15 seconds of me not knowing if he was going to do his classic sign-off, in which point, after like 15 seconds of silence, I just did it. So that was what happened last week, just as a little explanation. But this week, return to form. We will see you all next week. And Crocker,
bye!
Yes, exactly what I wanted.